Hello and welcome back to Raised by Giants. Good to see everyone. Welcome everyone in the chat and any moderators and channel members out there, and to anyone that's listening to the replay. Thanks for joining us. And if you're listening on the audio only on Apple Podcast or Spotify, hello and welcome. Thanks for listening. Check all of the links in the description for all of my social media. My documentary is JFKX, A Clockwork Shining, are in the description of this video, as well as all of the podcast links, and my guest links are there as well. Just hit the more button underneath the title of the video to the drop down of the description. I've had many people reach out to me and be like, "Oh, I can't find any of your stuff." Well, it's all in the description of the video. Just hit the more link underneath the title of the video and you'll get the drop down. It has all my social media, everywhere you can find me online, and as well as my documentaries. So with that down, we have with us today here to discuss some very interesting topics that I've come across. Former DoD and U.S. Army military intelligence security specialist, anti-terrorism and counterintelligence, Trey Hudson. Welcome back to the show. How's it going?
Ryder, great to be here. I hope that you're getting geared up for the beginning of the summertime. Something I would like to mention is that everybody take time for Memorial Day and remember what the day is actually about, and just remember our fallen service members that gave the ultimate sacrifice in the duty to our country. But being somewhat on that somber note, that I hope everybody's getting ready for the summer, and it's going to be absolutely fantastic for you and all the listeners.
Thank you very much, Trey. Yeah, that's really important to remember, and not just go out and drink and get all smashed for these kinds of holidays. I don't really know if they really do that for Memorial Day, but I think a lot of our holidays have been kind of hijacked in that sense. It's just more of let's go out and party and like get as crazy and as wild as we possibly can, and it takes away the true meaning of the actual holiday.
Yeah, by all means, have fun, but everybody just remembers the cost of the ability to have that fun here in the U.S.
Absolutely. So I've been online a lot. This is kind of came from TikTok. Now, there's a lot of people. Did you go to public school, Trey?
Yeah, I did.
Okay. Do you remember ever having any like weird or like strange tests in public school?
It's I do remember, when I was very young, I was in the gifted program. So, they gave you a plethora of tests, to test aptitude, intelligence, et cetera, et cetera. And that was, very young. I was in, grade school, elementary school when that happened. But I don't remember those tests being very strange. Now, albeit I didn't have a baseline to compare it to. I didn't know what all the other kids were being tested. But I don't remember anything, particularly, jumping out at me like anything testing psi, capabilities or abilities or anything like that. Now, there was one test that I took very later on in life for the Central Intelligence Agency, and it was kind of odd, but that's a whole other story.
Yeah, there's this really it's becoming a really popular thing right now, is like these GATE programs, they're calling them.
Yeah.
In school. Now, there's a lot of confusion around it because people have you have the Gateway program, you got the Stargate program, which the Gateway program was the Robert Monroe Institute.
Right.
The astral travel, and then there's a Stargate program, which was a DIA Army intelligence program to use psychics to spy on to collect foreign intelligence data.
Absolutely.
Now, but they're using this name as like a name for these programs that were going on in school. Now, there's a bunch of different theories as to what they were actually being used for, but several people remember having headphones on, listening to strange audio recordings, getting flashcards, seeing flashcards, and having to predict what's going to be on the next flashcard, essentially. And I have a video here that we're going to listen to that kind of explains a lot of this stuff. And it's one of the only ones that I could find that was in a long form type of content that details everything that they supposedly went through. And I reached out to some colleagues, some friends, and they've essentially confirmed this, that
Mhm.
was really going on, that they were really doing this type of thing in
Mhm.
schools, were against children, apparently. Now, I found that really interesting because there's this, article, well, not an article, it's a part of a document that it was in the Sunstreak document. Here, let me see,
Mhm.
pull this up really quickly. I had seen it in, uh, weirdly from the documents that you sent me. Okay, so this document says that
Mhm.
only scientific claim of detection of remote viewing is known.
Mhm.
Chinese scientists claim to have detected remote viewing during their experiments with children. Okay, data on these experiments is insufficient to validate this claim.
Right.
Work to replicate these experiments, however, is ongoing at SRI. Now, this is really weird because this looks like that it was attempted to be
Yeah.
scratched out right here, like
Yeah.
they attempted to, like, mark this part
Yeah. Or
out.
redact it, right.
Yeah. Now, I don't know if this means that they're trying to duplicate the experiments that the Chinese was doing with children, because there isn't any documentation or evidence that SRI or any military were doing any kind of experiments officially
Mhm.
on children. But I just thought that this was really interesting how it looks like it's trying to be marked out, but it says to work to replicate these experiments, however, is going on at SRI.
Yeah, that sounds really kind of scary and nefarious on the surface, and I understand how it could be shocking to people. But and once again, I'm gonna have to give the disclaimer. I have never personally worked in anything I'm getting ready to describe. But, I talk to people and all of that stuff. So, what a lot of people don't realize is a lot of the larger research universities, there's a very, very close symbiotic relationship with the Department of Defense, especially ARPA, but used to be called DARPA, Advanced Research Projects Agency. And it makes sense that they take the best minds at the PhD and PhD candidate level, and they fund research at the places best equipped to do research, which is, albeit, research universities. Oftentimes, this research is classified. Oftentimes, this research is classified at the special access level, SAP programs. Uh, what a lot of people don't realize is a lot of your larger, major research universities actually have uh, contracting SAP oversight officers that manage these programs that the universities are applying research to. So, people that remember having these experiments, these precognitive experiments, with the headphones and the flashcards and all of that, I always wonder is are these people who have had these experiences at their public schools, are these public schools close to geographically a major research university that has a contract to do contract work, research work with either DARPA, the Defense Department, Central Intelligence Agency, or any of the whole slew of alphabet agencies.
Well, it's interesting that they would do this in school because
Yeah.
it would be highly illegal for them to do experiments in an official military aspect on children, or experiments by three-letter organizations on children in any kind of official capacity. So it would make sense that they would wrap these kinds of programs up into the public school curriculum. And
Yeah.
then it becomes, well, what is the reason for that? And there's many theories which we're going to get into here in a little bit
Yeah.
as
Yeah.
to why that they would be doing that. But it would make sense because they
Yeah.
couldn't just do it out in the open. And if you wanted to run these types of experiments, you would just wrap it into the public school system, so then no one really questioned it. It was just exactly like how you were saying that you didn't think that it was weird because you didn't have anything to run against it, right?
Right. Well,
And that makes sense because then people would be like, okay, well, they wouldn't really know that it was strange or weird until like later on in life. And then everything gets really hazy.
Right.
moving forward whenever you're older, and then you think that you remember something that happened, but our memories are really fallible.
Right, and I'll give you an example of this. My youngest daughter, and I'm not going to go into details, but she has as a child, had a pretty serious medical condition, which is chronic, and she manages it, today successfully. And she was being treated at a hospital affiliated with a major research university. It was the best hospital in the region to treat this particular malady. And she would get things all the time, or sent to us saying, "Hey, we're trying a new procedure. We're trying a new compound. We're trying this or that. Would you like for your daughter to be enrolled as a test subject? Compensation may be provided." Now, we opted out of that. That was our choice as a parent. But, if you want a group of research subjects that are untainted to test, perhaps, are these skills learned, which, as remote viewing is learned, you can teach remote viewing, or is there an innate, predisposition to this ability? What a better group of test subjects than our children. And you can even go back and look at the Civil Defense Agency and DOE, Department of Energy. They had a program back in the 50s and 60s where they would collect baby teeth. And you can look this up. This is really kind of creepy. Is they would send out these little containers to kids in elementary school, and they would say, "Help science, send us your baby teeth." And these kids, when their teeth would fall out, they would put them in these little envelopes or cans and send them to the Department of Energy. And what DOE was doing is seeing how much radioactive fallout was being absorbed by children that resides in the marrow of their baby teeth.
What? That is nuts. What year was this happening?
That was in the 50s and 60s. Yeah, and you can look this up. Look up Department of Energy collecting baby teeth. And they had like little posters they'd put up, and and classes would have contests to see who could collect the most baby teeth. And be a good citizen. Send in your baby teeth.
Wow. I gave my tooth to science. Cold War cache of 100,000 baby teeth provides unique opportunity to understand long-term radiation effects. Wow.
So
That is so weird.
There's your baseline.
That is so weird.
And that's actually from a university, I think, that article. Yeah, UNC Chapel Hill, University of North Carolina.
Wow. This whole thing reads like a movie. He said our study of radioactivity in baby teeth near nuclear reactors was patterned after the original research. I became colleagues with several leaders on the study. No one said anything about baby teeth being left over.
Yeah. So the
Wow.
government has these giant caches of baby teeth. I mean, it reads like fiction, but it actually, it actually happened.
Wow.
And what's funny is you can go back and look at some of the, I'm not going to call it propaganda material, but the public affairs material that was sent out by the Department of Public Health, the Department of Energy, to encourage children and their parents to participate is just really a unique snapshot, of some of the stuff that was going on during the Cold War. I'm a Cold War kid, I grew up during the Cold War, so it was just a very different time. So it's a very, very interesting, very quaint, but the other side of that same coin, it can be somewhat disturbing.
That is wild. I did not know about that. Thanks for letting me know.
No, you're welcome.
There's also really strange things like in Washington. Are you familiar with that story of like the shoes? Like the thousands of shoes that were just washing up on shore.
Yeah, some of them had feet still in them. And
what is the deal with that?
I don't know. I found it was a very soulful story. No, that's a bad pun.
No.
Yeah, that's interesting. I've seen all kinds of theories on that. There are bodies that get caught in the various vortexes of the Pacific Ocean, and pieces wash up. And since the shoes are buoyant because of the material, when the rest of the body sloughs away, you still have a inverted foot that washes up on the shore. And because of the way the currents and eddies run, you have like a little foot zone, I guess. I guess is what you would call it there on the coast of Washington.
Yeah, but why in the shoes? Like you would think that, like if you're in the water, why would you have shoes on?
Well, that's it. Are they murder victims? Are they refugees going from point A to point B and their boat sinks or capsizes? Are they victims of some sort of unknown genocidal activity by a nation state or other group? We don't know, because all we have is a shoe and maybe a little bit of DNA in the shoe. And who knows? The world is a lot stranger than we realize.
This NBC article is trying to say that it's been solved, but I think that hasn't been solved.
I mean, one man's solution is another man's mystery. So that's kind of loaded wording there.
Yeah, this is wild. I haven't looked into it too much, but I was aware of it because it was part of a documentary series on Netflix, though, Unsolved Mysteries or whatever it was. But that one was weird, and then there was another one. Was it not rain, but like weird fish, not fish, like jelly. They blamed it on jellyfish, but it happened like twice or something. But it was like this weird. It was Washington blobs or something. It was like the blobs that came out of the sky and apparently got a lot of people sick. And then they said that it was due to exploding jellyfish from the sea or something. I don't know.
Now, what would really be cool if you had shoes washing up on the Washington western coast filled with baby teeth?
That would be a hell of a mystery there. All right, let's listen to this video. It's from Shane Dawson's YouTube channel. It's Shane Dawson 2. It's his YouTube channel. He does a podcast. He's a really popular person online that does a lot of conspiracy videos. And I'm just going to put up the disclaimer here because I don't know what his copyright stuff is like. But this is a fair use disclaimer under Section 107 of the Copyright Act of 1976. Allowance is made for fair use for purposes such as criticism, comment, news reporting, teaching, scholarship, education, and research. And that is exactly what we're going to be doing here. Me and Trey Hudson is going to be commenting on the Shane Dawson podcast about the school gate programs to garner more insight onto the topic. Here we go.
That brings me to the theory that you were talking to me about, and I was like, oh my God, save it for the podcast. We got a bunch of emails about this.
We're talking about the program, yeah? Are you familiar with the program in schools?
Yes, it was that one.
They edited out the name just for, I guess, being safe on this, but gate program, you get it. I think that they're referring to this as, they're saying the gateway program.
Right.
But we know that that's not true.
Yes, it's like there's a bunch of different programs that have different names, but all of it was under the guise of the government is providing extra time to students that they think are more
equipped to succeed.
Yeah.
Well, there was I remember like the weird tests.
Yes. So they used to test us in the 90s. At least I remember being tested. They would do a bunch of weird tests. Sometimes they would even say that they were doing a hearing test or an eye test. And because I don't want to be sued, I'm scared now.
Just a theory.
Just a theory that when you put on those, and by the way, like, I don't know, can you still see like the hearing test? They'd take you to a portable that they like set up.
It's like a trailer.
Yeah. So you go into the portable, you sit down at a place, there's cards up so you can't see the person sitting next to you. There's like no windows around. They say, sit into this little tiny cubicle that we've made. And there's like a box. It almost looks like a 1980s like plastic briefcase that's like a box.
Yeah.
And they put it down and you put on these like old ass like headphones And then a voice comes on, and it's like a man's voice from the 50s, and it says something like, "All right, the voice you're about to hear is just in your right ear. Get ready for a hearing test made just for you."
You should be hearing my voice in your right ear.
That little clip right there is
Oh,
what has been supposedly triggering a lot of people. They
Oh, no.
remember hearing that voice.
Oh, I recognize the voice. Absolutely. That's absolutely.
So you remember that too?
Well, no, when they said you're getting ready to hear a noise in your right ear, I know exactly what tape that came from. That's from the Gateway program, Robert Monroe.
That's what it is, dude. But how do they remember this being in school?
Well, the only thing now that was in the 90s. You got to remember, I graduated university in 1987, so that was that was well after me. It could be that the government gave a research grant to the Gateway program, or the Gateway licensed the HemiSync program to to some agency or university to test susceptibility to psi, with students. It, and of course, putting morality aside, legality aside, looking at it strictly from a research perspective, to me, it seemed like a reasonable way to go about testing, psi ability at an early age, is to actually test these children using something that's, well documented, like HemiSync. And we all know that the Monroe Institute was used by military personnel. I know military personnel that went to Gateway, and it was paid for, by the government. Jim Shannon, Colonel Shannon with the 1st Earth Battalion, I think did some Gateway stuff. And General Bert Stubblebine was familiar with Gateway. So, it makes sense to me. It's interesting that they picked up on that voice, because that is, Monroe, from the Monroe Institute. And I can't remember which level of the Gateway that is, but it's actually in the Gateway HemiSync, programs I've used. I've heard that same voice in my right ear. Absolutely.
I just got the major chills right now. I'm getting the chills because that is so strange. It's so weird. Okay, they're using and you can see how people can get confused with this, right?
Yeah.
And thinking that they're a part of the Monroe Institute's Gateway program, and then how they're also confused about the Stargate program.
Right.
If you're in school and you hear this and they're putting these headphones on you to test whatever experiment that they're doing, and you realize that those are the Monroe Institute Gateway tapes that you're hearing, you're going to think that you were a part of the Monroe Institute Gateway program.
Yeah, and something you have to be, cognizant of is three programs I'm familiar with. Okay, one is Grill Flame, Stargate, the military remote viewing program. You have that, and then running adjacent to that, you have Robert Monroe and the Gateway program, which we know was also utilized by military personnel looking at enhancing psi capabilities. Then the third triad of that is, and my mind just went completely blank. The Gateway, oh, and then the Silva Mind Control program, which is another very similar program to Gateway. And all of these programs are running kind of simultaneously, and there's a very thin veneer between the three programs, and it's reasonable to think that there might actually be some overlap, that remote viewing potential could be enhanced by HemiSync and the Gateway, and Robert Monroe and the Monroe Institute. So that that makes sense. I actually know another Army intelligence guy that he says that he went to Gateway as a civilian after he got out of the Army, but he also is very familiar with HemiSync and has gone through the program himself. So who knows?
Oh, this is getting weirder and weirder, Trey. Weirder and weirder. I don't know how to connect all these things, but there's something weird going on. Okay, let's continue the video here.
They are saying this is not a hearing test. that is actually the beginning of a hypnosis
What?
that is very famously used by a lot of people. So I'm going to butcher all of this a little bit, but when it came to the Cold War, that's like around that same time, this organization started, which was, I think was called the National Defense Education Act was created, which links education to national defense, which is.
Are you familiar with that?
No, but it seems reasonable to me. That they showed a picture they showed was President Eisenhower. So, there were a lot of things during the Cold War that tied in. Well, we just talked about the baby teeth thing, that tied in defense and early childhood education.
Interesting.
Weird. And they started funding programs for gifted children around that time. Like when I was in elementary school, it was the early 90s. And my friend Haley actually I was in, which is a different thing, but it's because I didn't take the test seriously. But she doesn't remember much from the program at all. Because when I started, I was like, you were in, right? She goes, yeah. I go, where was it? She goes, it was in like a small room off the library, I think, but like I don't really remember much about it. And that's the thing. Most kids don't remember very much about.
I was in it.
What?
I think I was in it. There was the hearing test.
Yeah.
There was a weird like flashcard test.
Yeah.
Where it was like, you're predicting the car.
Yes.
Predicting the fucking car.
Okay, you might have been in, because this is something that all the kids remember. So they would do
And they gave me a nerd rope.
Everybody talks about the ropes and the different colored ropes. You're supposed to, oh my God, you're like literally, my nipples are so hard right now.
They're joking, but apparently that's like a thing. Like dude, I loved nerd ropes when I was growing up. I freaking loved nerd ropes.
And I vaguely remember, and of course, like I said, I was a child not early in the Cold War, but right in the midst of the Cold War in the 60s when I started elementary school. And I vaguely remember something with an aptitude test and ropes.
No way.
And of course, this is kind of one of those things. And everybody listening, take this for what it's worth. Is this is like stirring up some memories that I haven't thought about in a very long time. But like I said, I was in the gifted program, and the school that I was originally tested in was Metcalf Elementary School in Gainesville, Florida. Okay, what else is in Gainesville, Florida? There's a little school called the University of Florida, which is a major research university. I transferred from Metcalf Elementary School to a place called Hightower Elementary School in DeKalb County, Georgia. And then later on moved over to a thing called Peachtree Elementary School in Gwinnett County. What major research institute do we have that has ties to DARPA that's in that Atlanta area? The Georgia Institute of Technology. Just saying.
Wow.
And so it makes you wonder, maybe is it an accident that I went into the career field I did and ended up doing the stuff I'm doing now?
I don't think so. And that's just me. I don't have any proof of it. But that is what several people that I've talked to that's been inside of the intelligence community, just as yourself, your former DOD and Army intelligence. I've talked to other former DOD, Army intelligence, CIA agents, and they have all said almost identically the same thing that you're saying right now.
Okay, I'm going to tell you something that'll really scramble your brain. Is, as we talked about before, my background is I studied psychology at the University of West Georgia. And they had people like Bill Roll on their faculty, famous parapsychologist Bill Roll, and Chris Anstoos, Don Rice, Mike Ahrens, who was a protege of Abraham Maslow, those kind of guys. I was in ROTC there, and when your fourth year of ROTC, while you're a college senior, university senior, you're branched in the Army, so you know what you're going to do. And I was branched military intelligence. And one of my professors, asked, hey, what did you end up getting branched? And I said, Army intelligence. And he laughed. He goes, yeah, you're going to end up as SRI. Which I never did, but he was kind of joking and said, yeah, you're going to SRI.
But you had a major interest in it.
Yeah. Oh, yeah, absolutely. And my senior thesis was on dream analysis. So I was, absolutely, tracking along that route.
Trey, this is blowing my mind right now.
But professionally, I did counterintelligence and security. So I never did anything like that, in my career, but my interest was always there and it was always percolating there in the background, as we know with the Meadow Project and other stuff.
This seems like, and I'm don't mean to jump the gun here, because we're going to finish the rest of this video.
Yeah,
so-
I'm sorry. I totally went down a rabbit trail. I
No,
apologize.
no. Bring up anything as you get it. But I think that these programs were to detect people that is going to be good for the military and for the intelligence community.
I mean, that would make
think
sense.
That's what these programs are for. They test you. They test your mental acuity. They test your parapsychology, your psychic abilities. They're doing it all. They're wrapping it all up into one. And a lot of people that I've talked to that are confirmed former FBI, former CIA, former DOD, former Army intelligence, just like yourself. Well, you're DOD and Army intelligence, but it seems like they're all wrapped up into the same thing. Okay. And whenever they go through these programs, they're kind of watched throughout their career. They're kind of like pushed in a certain direction. There's someone in the background that's kind of there to get them to go in like a certain direction because they've been tested. They know their abilities. They know what they're going to be good at. So they get them a part of the intelligence community. They get them a part of the military. That seems to be exactly what's going on.
Yeah, I do know that, at least for Army intelligence, some of the things they look for, strangely enough, are people that have degrees in the humanities. They're not necessarily looking for people like with engineering degrees, as they want people with degrees like in literature, music, psychology, people that have, a very broad understanding of the world and able to look at, the big picture of things.
I think that that's what's going on. I think that that's what it is. Now there's, a lot of people want to put the kind of woo woo spin on
Yeah.
it, it was for, communicating with aliens, which this is one of the theories that they're going to mention
Right.
in the rest of this video. But just like everything within the community, you've been on this show several times. We've examined so much stuff, all
Right.
these strange and weird cases. There's normally always a based, rational explanation for a lot of this stuff. And I think that is the based, rational explanation for what's going on with these gate programs.
Yeah, I mean, and Walter had echoed it, and I've echoed it when he said is one thing the government is very pragmatic, extremely pragmatic, and when you find a student that has musical aptitude, you nurture that aptitude, and maybe they become a famous concert pianist. Why not with other stuff?
That's right. All right, let's get more into this video. Maybe it'll trigger some more things for you.
Yeah. Do you also feel like do you have reoccurring dreams where you feel like
I can't do this right now. Okay, keep going.
Do you want me to leave you alone?
No, keep going.
Okay,
keep
because
going,
it's scaring me.
'cause
Do you have like reoccurring dreams where you feel like you're like to some degree they're predictive of the future and then something happens that you
all the fucking time? My life is that. I literally
can you see my
with
nipples?
Our post with Ben, I've had all these weird moments, and then the next day I meet them, and this is crazy. Keep going.
Okay, so
have you had that, Trey?
What, nipples?
Yeah, are your nipples super rock hard right now? No.
Well, maybe they are.
Yeah,
Let's talk after the show. No, I'm kidding. I've had precognitive dreams. One of the most profound ones, and my coworkers and my wife can attest to this, is after the Challenger disaster. Is I had a dream. Quite a while afterwards, I said I dreamt that like part of the wing of the Challenger washed up on a beach. And then the next day, a news report came out that the largest piece of wreckage of the Challenger was found that very week. but I had dreamed about it before it was actually released, to the public. So, I think most people that explore that, that area of themselves have, precognitive dreams.
Wow, another one confirmed. That's so strange. I've never really had anything like that happen to me. Now I've had dreams where like I've dreamed of someone and I hadn't seen them in like a really long time, and then when I wake up, I went to lunch and then I seen them. I've
Yeah.
had dreams like that before, but nothing like surrounding an event or a disaster or anything like that.
Yeah. Dreams are just putting our toe in the pond on the other side of the liminal awareness, which is what we do when we remote view. So it's, it's kind of the same thing. So it makes sense that you can access the past, future, other people, anywhere in the universe or other universes, through your dream cycle. Yeah.
Weird.
Did they give you a weird little pink drink? Do you remember getting a little pink drink?
I thought that was to test my blood sugar.
No. So everybody literally, like, can you see my nipples?
Nipples.
What is going on?
Everybody in the program remembers getting a little pink drink, and after that pink drink they don't remember much else until something like this happens and there's an exchange, and they're like, no, I remember this, and I remember the weird shapes, and they would show me these cards and they'd want me to know what was on the next card before I saw the card, so I was like predicting what was on the card, and they would put something in a box and I'd have to know what was in the box, and they'd make me wear 3D glasses, like one red eye, one blue eye, and yeah, so all of that, they believe, the theory says, is...
We're going to get into the theory stuff here, but do you remember ever taking any kind of drink or a substance, a pink drink, anything like that?
I like pina coladas. No, I don't remember the drink specifically. Now they were doing, back in the olden days, they were doing a lot of vaccinations, and I'm trying to remember there was some, I can't remember if it was polio or something that was in a small drink, and memory is a tricky thing. Sometimes events that are widely spaced, people remember as a single event. So, but I do remember vision tests, and I do remember hearing tests, and I remember something with the ropes, which just could have been a cognitive test for intelligence, an IQ test. And I fooled them all. My IQ is only actually about 87. But
whatever, Trey, you're up there, bro.
But I'll be here all week. Don't forget to tip the wait staff. Yeah, so I remember a lot of that, a lot of those things, and I do remember vision test, having to put on like glasses, and and I remember something about, it was something to do with a circus. They showed like an image of like a merry-go-round or an elephant or something, and it's like, what is this? And I remember my mother taking me to, and I want to say it was the University of Florida for some tests. But, I was so young, I just don't recall any specificity of it. Unfortunately, both my parents have passed. But, some of the stuff is ringing true with me. And I would be very curious to see if the people that are remembering this attended elementary school near a major research university.
Seems to be the case. All right, let's continue.
Is an educational program that's inspired by or directly linked to the MK Ultra program. And the MK Ultra program was when they were fucking around with mind control and psychedelic drugs and like the men who talk to goats shit. And also, I would say Stranger.
The men who stare at goats. She got that, but I'll give her a pass.
Yeah.
Things, because all of this sounds a lot like what happened to 11. Everybody who was in the, not everybody, but like most people I've spoken to don't remember a thing about it. They have all those things that you remember. They think that was the hearing and seeing tests in school.
And so what was their goal? What did they want to prep these kids for?
They wanted to prep these kids to start learning how to, which you fucking later did in a video. What? Astral projection.
Yes, 100%.
Astral projection, and that thing that you did where he guessed Cheesecake Factory.
Remote viewing.
Remote viewing. Yes. So all of the kids that
I'm gonna throw up.
Yeah, and it's crazy because I was thinking about that on the way over here.
So stressed.
And so the point was, because they were worried about all these things going on, like this was the educational defense system that they were putting together, because kids have like a thinner veil and are more open and more suggestible. And the extension of this, where it becomes a little cuckoo nuts.
Okay.
is some
Where it becomes.
Well, so like honestly, like I'm with the theory to this point because I know that the government does weird stuff and I know that they get like creative about things. Like there's a bunch of private companies that their sole existence is to be creative and come up with weird weapons, like different weapons development things. Like that's their sole function and purpose. So of course someone's going to think like, "Oh, let's tap into the next generation."
Yeah.
The step further,
which then gets into like what Yuri
Right.
Bezmenov was saying in the early 80s. Like if you control the education system, then
Right.
in, 20 years, 30 years, then you're going to have a completely mind controlled society because those people that are coming up now are going to be in positions of power later on.
Well, something you have to, and this is, it's really important that we keep things in context. The Cold War was a very, very scary time. And in 1970, and I just happen to have a copy of the book laying right next to me, this book came out, and it's called Psychic Discoveries Behind the Iron Curtain. And it says, the most important book about ESP research and the validity of cult tradition yet to appear. Astonishing facts behind psychic research in official laboratories from Prague to Moscow. And it talks about the Soviets and the other countries under the Soviet sphere of influence, the communist bloc, the Com bloc, really delving into psychic research, in doing the remote viewing, doing the astral projection, doing, and I believe the term, the Kosarev mirrors, using those to enhance capabilities of test subjects so they could maximize their capabilities of intelligence collection and supremacy on the battlefield. Now turn the page. If your absolute sworn enemy just bought a 44 Magnum, you're going to go out and at minimum, you're going to buy a 44 Magnum because you want to maintain parity. But if you're smart, you're now going to buy a 30-06 rifle because that's even more powerful than their 44 Magnum. So how do you think the U.S. government reacted when our intelligence services started, saying they're looking into this research? And then, doggone it, in 1970, right in the middle of the Cold War, a book comes out and it's like basically puts it in the public's face. Hey, we're behind on this. What are you going to do about it, DARPA? What are you going to do about Defense Intelligence Agency? What do you think, CIA? Are you asleep at the switch? So how would a government react to that? And what they would do is they would come up with a program of their own. And they would start to try to identify, remember, I've always talked about indicators, things that indicate future events or actions. They would look for indicators that show a propensity towards psi capabilities so we could reach parity and maybe possibly supremacy over the Com bloc psychic program, psi programs.
One of my favorite lines from The Men Who Stare at Goats was, they were like, so we need to start a program because the Soviets have started a psychic spy program. And then the guy's like, well, it turns out that they really weren't starting a psychic spy program. And then the colonel was like, also, we started a psychic spy program because we thought that they were doing a psychic spy program. And now we have a psychic spy program. It was they really did, but it was
they
really
did
funny for the movie. But it makes a lot of sense because Russia after World War II got more Nazi soldiers than the United States did.
Yeah.
They reportedly got over 6,000.
Right.
3,000, including all their family members and everything. So around roughly 6,000 people. Now, Lynn Buchanan says that Russia they were very sophisticated in their remote viewing capability, and they found other uses of remote viewing, not just collecting intelligence data.
No, they can do offensive remote viewing. Absolutely. And the Chinese were researching it too.
Yep. That's exactly what's going on. Makes a lot of sense. And of course we would want to do it. And then that just gets into, if something is proven to work, I mean, how long did they have that program running? They had it running since 78. So, and then they shut it down in 95. What is that, like 17 years that they had it running, and then they just closed it down, which in my mind is, well, they shut it down because they already had another program, or like the Russians, they found another use for it, and then they couldn't carry the people over from that was in the Stargate program into a new program that was doing something completely different with it because it was a lot more nefarious.
Right. I'll give you an example. Oh, my mind just went blank. Constellation, the program that was just outed, the unacknowledged SAT program, Immaculate Constellation, that was just outed. Okay, just because Immaculate Constellation was what they call in the SAP world de-established, that information and that capability was stood up under another program with a different name and a different compartmentalization. So, every time I hear somebody say, yeah, they shut down the remote viewing program. Yeah, they might have shut down, Grill Flame and Stargate and some of the other programs, but I'm sure that capability still exists out there under another umbrella program. It's just too good of an intelligence asset. It would not make sense to, throw the baby out with the bathwater. We have intelligence collection programs that are less reliable than remote viewing that we're still using. So, it just makes sense.
Yes, it does. And we'll never know about those programs because it's so deeply classified and they're just running under something that we'll never know about.
Right.
But we do know about the other ones because they were declassified. And that is the whole thing of this. Like, they had to come out and say that they were using this, right? So therefore people wouldn't continue to look for it, because if the whole thing got exposed and they never said that they were doing it and never got declassified in the beginning, then that would mean that all of it would have to be declassified. They would have to know what they were doing up until that point, but they didn't do that. They declassified it and they were like, oh yeah, we were working with these psychics to collect the intelligence data since 1978. Big deal. It's over. It's done. Meanwhile, they got another one that's going on with a different purpose or a different reason that is a lot more nefarious than just collecting intelligence data on foreign assets.
Well, the thousands and thousands and thousands of pages I sent you on remote viewing. Do you think that's the sexy stuff?
No. That's the bare minimum.
That's the minimum.
But it's incredible, though. It's really incredible just reading through them and looking through them and seeing all the drawings and everything that they had done and how detailed they were about everything.
Right.
Like, there's no sensible person that would look through those documents and be like, this doesn't work. This isn't real. We need to shut down this program.
Right.
What? They're talking about wind speed. They're describing the environment, how hot it is outside, the temperature, the altitude. Like, give me a break. There's no way that anybody within government, even someone that doesn't believe in remote viewing and doesn't believe in psychics, if you read through all those documents, you're going to come out with a different state of mind. You're going to be like, this shit is real.
Yeah, every time I have somebody come up to me and say, well, remote viewing doesn't work, and I counter it with two things. I said, number one, I know it works because I've done it. And number two, do the research. And after you really do the research, see if you still have the same opinion, which basically the research is going back through the CIA, INSCOM, Intelligence and Security Command, and SRI documents, and see if you still have that same attitude. And if you do, then, I can't help you. You're beyond help.
That's right. That's exactly how I feel about it too. All right, let's get, then we got like 2 or 3 more minutes left of this video. They get into more theories about aliens, stuff like that, but I think it's just neat to listen to.
That they believe that these kids were specifically being taught how to communicate with aliens.
Oh my God, Jared, I have talked about this experience on the podcast before and in real life. When I was really young and I saw 3 gray aliens outside of our bedroom window, I was on the top bunk and it scarred me for life. And mom told me they were guardian angels and I freaked the fuck out.
Oh my God, you have shared that on this podcast.
I'm going to cry.
Wait,
what the fuck is wrong with me?
Literally a lot of the kids also, that's another one of the
How many times not to make this about
and they
me,
say gray aliens.
But Spencer, how many times have I said, I think aliens are going to contact me. We need to get a camera.
Yeah,
I've been like, that's going to happen and we're going to fucking film that shit.
That's so crazy.
I have chills all over my body.
Throw up.
I'm
Yeah.
so stressed your cat had to come.
Do I need to leave you like the dress needs to leave us? I don't want to be around for the aliens.
But yeah, so that's the thought. The thought is that they were teaching them how to astral project into like conference rooms with aliens.
Are the aliens going to be nice?
Ask him. It seems like he knows.
Well, I'm just trying to decide if I
I'm
can be
like
around
so
for this.
obsessed weirdly into aliens.
Yeah.
This is so weird.
Well, and I asked another friend of mine because her husband was like, yeah, I'm pretty sure that I was abducted as a child. And I was like, I hit her up and I was like, yo, was your husband in the program too? He wasn't.
I wonder, what if that's why you're so into this genre of thing? Conspiracy,
this is too
extraordinary.
much. This is the weirdest day of my life.
Okay, I'm getting ready to absolutely blow your mind. Are you ready?
No, I am ready.
Okay. I told you that I was very young and I attended Metcalf Elementary School in Gainesville, Florida, where they administered, as far as I remember, vision, hearing, and IQ intelligence quotients tests. Okay. I have a distinct memory when I was a child living in our house, which was about 4 blocks from the elementary school. And I'm going to show you some figures that I drew in about 2013 of this event. Okay. That I remember when I was young, maybe 4 or 5 years old, I couldn't sleep. I was a little kid. I had insomnia. And in my room, I had a window on an outside, on the exterior wall of the house. On either side of that window were bookshelves. And in between the bookshelves was a desktop. So you could sit in between the bookshelves and play, on the desktop, and look out the window. And I remember one night waking up and I couldn't sleep. So I crawled up on top of the desktop and laid my head up against the window. And this is a drawing I did of, if you can see that, of basically just kind of laying up against the bookshelf with my back on the bookshelf, looking out the window along the side of the house.
Yeah.
Okay. So I made that drawing, of looking. And as I'm laying up against the window, looking down at the side of the house, I see something peer around a corner of the house. I don't know if you can see that right here.
Here, let me take me out.
A figure peering out around the corner of the house that had 2 eyes, a slit nose, and a slit mouth. And to this day, I have a hard time sleeping if there's an open window where I think something can look in at me.
Wow.
So they were just talking about, seeing grays and all after, these tests and all. That drawing was made in 2013, years and years before we even broached this subject.
Wow. Wow. See, my dad told me he experienced something sort of similar. I've never told this story before. But my dad told me when I was around 8 years old, he was upstairs with his brothers. He had 2 other brothers. Him and his older brother stayed in the same room, and his oldest brother had his own separate room. They were up really late. There was a porch like right outside of his window that had it was like a roof to the porch, so that you could like open the window and like get onto the roof of the porch if you wanted to. Like if you wanted to sneak out or whatever you wanted to do, whenever you were younger. And he said he moved the curtain to the window, and there was 3 men standing on the roof of the porch.
Mm-hmm.
They were in black suits, had strange faces. It was almost like their faces were like kind of veiled, kind of, and like had like really strange skin, like very pale white skin. And the one was like sitting down in like a chair in the middle, and then the other 2 were standing side by side with him. Now, I've told on this show a few times, I don't really like talking about it because, people will be like, "Oh, whatever, bro. You're just, seeing things you were a kid or whatever." But when I was growing up, do you remember the old school like wood paneling? It's kind of like your wood paneling right behind you. It's
Yeah.
almost identical to that.
Yeah.
Okay.
No, I remember it.
Yeah, you got it. You got it
Yeah,
in
I
your
got it.
house. Okay. Yeah. So that wood paneling there. Hold on. Let me bring you back. I want to get me.
Yeah, just the old fashioned 1970s, 1980s wood paneling.
Paneling in our house. And every night, whenever I was growing up, I would see entities come out of the wood paneling. They would just morph out of the wood paneling, like faces, like distorted faces, weird and strange things just come out of the wood paneling. Okay. And it freaked me out. They didn't ever like touch me or like hurt me or anything, but it just scared me because I'm a really young kid. I don't know what's going on. And I told my parents about it. I was like, hey, I'm seeing these things come out of the wood paneling. And they were like, okay, well, something must be wrong with you. You probably have something wrong with your vision, right? So they take me to the doctor. Okay. Go to the doctor. The doctor gives me like a flashcard.
Hmm.
It was like, this is a card protector. This is like a card protector but it was about this size.
Right.
Right. It was about this size and it had like bullseyes on it. It had like rings and like it was red. The bullseyes were really red and they were kind of like blurred a little bit. And the further that it went up, the clearer that the bullseyes got. Okay, so they started out really like blurry, and there was three of them. They started out really blurry, and then as it got to the last one was really clear. Okay, so he was like, whenever you can make these bullseyes pop up off of the card, come back and see me. Right. And he told my parents that there was nothing wrong with me, that everything was good. Okay. And he was like, once you can make these bullseyes pop up off of the card, come back and see me. And I didn't ever went back to see him. But that's where the flashcard thing is coming in with me. Now, I didn't go to public school, so I didn't get any of these strange and weird tests. So, but the flashcard thing that has always stuck with in my mind because he could have said that I was like insane or that I was
Right.
crazy or whatever, but he somehow knew that I was experiencing something and that nothing was wrong with me.
Yeah,
And
that
he
it was a
didn't-
yeah, it was a real phenomena. Yeah, real experience.
strange.
And that's something I've always wondered is, people that, A, that are in this business, or B, people that are interested in this kind of stuff, is do they have similar experiences and similar memories? And does that predispose us to kind of going this route in our lives? Because I know a lot of the people I've talked to on my team, in other groups, all have kind of a similar kind of, memory and life experience of strange things. I'm not going to go too deep down the whole abduction thing. That's fraught with a lot of controversy. But, one of the questions that comes up when I talk to different people is, do all of us have a common lived experience with something other? And that experience started when we were very young. And I would go out on a limb and say the answer to that is probably yes.
Yeah, I think so. And I think that some of the doctors had to know this and some of the schools had to know this. They had to be involved in some kind of way. I mean, all the people that you talked to that was a part of the Stargate program, which we know, again, it wasn't always called the Stargate program, it ran under many names.
Right.
Girl Flame, Centerlane, all these different programs.
Right.
But they all kind of explain an event, and then their superior kind of comes to them and was like, I think you would be good with this program. Like with David Morehouse, it was after he had a near-death experience, essentially.
Right. Yep. He was struck by a bullet fragment. Yeah.
Exactly. Lynn Buchanan, he had like some like telekinesis ability that wrecked all kinds of thousands of dollars worth of computers.
Mm-hmm.
But then his superior officer was like, okay, well, I think you would be good for this program. You know what I mean? So it's like,
Right.
they know that these people aren't crazy or they're not insane, and they know where to like put them. I don't know if that's making any sense or not, but
Yeah, no, it is. It is. It's if you show a predisposition for a certain, like I've known people I've talked to that said, they were recommended to take go talk to the recruiters for First Special Operations Detachment Delta or Delta Force, because they were soldiers that had a certain aptitude, and Delta recruits from all military occupational specialties. It's not just infantrymen or Green Berets. It's cooks and drivers and all of this stuff. And I think commanders are told to look out for people with certain attributes and show a proclivity towards certain skill sets.
So to give a brief overview here, as a former DoD and U.S. Army military intelligence, because that gives you, precedent over this kind of stuff, more credibility than others. What do you think about this GATE program? Do you think that this was real? Do you think that this was happening? And what do you believe that they were doing it for?
What I believe is kind of what I touched on, at the beginning of the broadcast, is I think that what these people were experiencing was probably a government contracted research program through a major research university. It could have been a PhD, candidate doing their research project. They got a grant from DoD or DIA or whomever to test psi capabilities in young children under the age of 11. I'm just, saying that maybe that's what their synopsis is. Maybe that's what their research proposal was. And as part of that is they reached out through the auspice of the university, be it the University of Florida, Georgia Tech, whatever, to the public school system, said, we would like to test, we're doing a research study under the auspice of the university. And we were wondering if we could use, just take a very short period of time, test some of your students, and maybe they would have follow-on testing. Now, none of this would be done in a vacuum. Parents would be sent home a rather innocuous consent form saying, you hereby grant permission for your child to take part in a university-sanctioned test where they're researching learning capabilities, or they're researching ability to process new information. It would sound real innocuous. And of course, any parent would say, well, yeah, of course, if the school says it's okay, and the kids will say, yay, I get out of class for, 2 hours on Thursday. And then they gather all this information up, and they generate a report, and they send it up to, whatever black hole in the, black vault up in the sky. And it's compiled with research projects from other universities all over the country. And then they start developing their theories and hypotheses and all of that and move on forward. Do I think it was recruiting for the secret space program? I do not. Do I think people were recruited at the age of 3 for the secret space program, and they served a lifetime on Zeta Reticuli working for the Supreme Galactic Command, and then they have their memories erased like in the movie Men in Black? I do not. I think it probably was a honest research study to test the proclivity and possible indicators of children with psi capability, to see if there are things like, what are their demographics? Does the capability show up only in certain brackets of IQ? Does it end at like 140 and begin at 112? I'm just throwing that out there. Is it tied to certain races of people with certain backgrounds? What about their parents' education? Maybe it has to do with certain kinds of foods children eat. Do they come from a place where they drink a lot of fluoride? Then you can go in the whole pineal gland and all of that stuff. So, I think that they were doing an honest study, and students were the perfect test subject, kind of like we saw with the collection of baby teeth during the Cold War.
Incredible. Thanks so much for coming on, Trey. Really appreciate your time this evening. And my mind's blown. My mind's blown.
Now put a Band-Aid on it and drink a glass of water. You'll wake up tomorrow feeling much better.
I'm going to need a big old glass of milk and cookies.
Yeah.
It'd be nice rest. Trey, can you let people know where to find you? Is your book out?
It will be on Tuesday, the 27th of May. Yes, that's our Return to the Meadow. And we actually go into hypnotic regression with some of the people that have had stranger experiences. We now have a psychoanalyst on our staff. So we review some of the strange things that happened to us in the past, like updates on the mysterious monkey bear lady or businesswoman of the forest, hypnotic regression, and it talks about our experiences that we've had at the Meadow since the last book was published. That will come out on Tuesday. TreyHudsonResearch.com, Trey Hudson-author on Facebook, and TreyHudsonResearch@gmail.com.
Awesome. I will get that. Do you have a pre-order? Do you have a pre-order link?
Yeah, if you go to Amazon and just click on I think the ebook is up for the Kindle version is up for pre-order, and so I'm hoping hard copies go live on Tuesday. And I will be at Centennial, Colorado in June, speaking for Colorado MUFON. And then I will be at the Snippy the Horse event, which Snippy was one of the first recorded animal mutilations in Alamosa, Colorado in August.
Is Katie going to be there for that one?
Katie will be there, yeah. Usually I hang out with Katie and we drive up to the event together.
Cool. I'm going to get you guys both on the same show. You and Katie Page. We're going to do it here next month, I think.
Yeah, the cool thing is she has been to the Meadow and I have been to the Clearview Ranch.
I want to go to the Clearview Ranch, bro.
It's got a weird energy. It's a strange place.
Take me, bro. I want to go, dude. That would be awesome. But yeah, links to Trey's stuff will be in the description of this video. And please be sure to hit the thumbs up button to help the channel in the algorithm. Share, subscribe, hit the bell icon as well for notifications. And we'll see you guys next time. Bye-bye.